Now for building this application here, I created another new Flutter project. I named it Chat App. And I replaced the default main.dart file with the one you also find attached, which in the end just defines a very basic app widget that adds some theming to the app. But we're going to build all the rest together from the ground up, step by step, and along the way, we'll of course practice what you already learned throughout this course, but we're also going to add all these new advanced features like image upload, authentication, and push notifications. So let's dive right in. And in this app here, which we're about to build, all users must create an account and sign in before they can start sending or receiving messages. So that will be the first step. Adding user authentication will be the first step, and therefore, of course, we need a screen and a form, so a combination of inputs that in the end allows users to sign in. Because when we talk about user authentication, we're in the end talking about the frontend and the backend communicating with each other again. The frontend is our Flutter app, and the backend could be any remote server, either a server fully controlled and programmed by you with your own server-side code, for example written with Node.js or Python, or a third-party service like Firebase. Either way, as part of that sign up and sign in process, your frontend app has to collect the user credentials, the user data, so email and password, for example, and it then must send that data to the backend where it can be stored in a database, but where it also can be validated. So that after you created a user, once the user wants to log in, those credentials are sent to the backend again, and then there the backend basically checks whether email and password match the email and password stored in the database. That's in a nutshell what authentication means. Now there is a bit more that belongs to it, and I'll get back to that. But since it all starts with collecting these user credentials and sending them to a backend, we need these two things to get started. We need a screen and a form in the Flutter app that does allow a user to enter their credentials, so email and password, for example. And we need a backend that supports user authentication. Now again, you could be writing such a backend on your own, and I have courses on that if you're interested. I have a Node.js course, for example, where you do learn how to write server-side code with JavaScript. But this course here is of course about Flutter, and Flutter is for building mobile apps, for building front ends. And therefore here, we're again going to use Firebase as a dummy third-party service, because Firebase, which we already used in the HTTP section earlier in the course, does not just offer this real-time database feature that we use there, but instead also supports user authentication and the storage and validation of user credentials. Now for that, you must log into your Google account and then either create a new Firebase project or use your existing project. And here I'm creating a new Firebase project, which I named Flutter Chat App here, but the name is up to you. We don't need Google Analytics, and with that we can create this project. And once that project was created, you can go to the build section here again, and there you'll find this authentication area. And it's there where you can enable authentication with Firebase. For that, here we can click on Get Started. And then here choose email password, because for this app, I want to allow users to log in with email and password. Now, if you should use Firebase for future Flutter projects you might be working on, you also see here that you have more options than creating and managing users with email password. You could, for example, also allow users to log in with their Google, Apple, or a couple of other accounts. That all works, and the official Firebase documentation is the place to go if you plan on using Firebase in your next Flutter projects. For this course, where I'm only using it as a dummy backend, basically, I'll choose email password here so that we can create new users with an email password combination, and we then also can log users in with such an email password combination. For that here, I'll choose enable, and then click Save. And with that set, you can use Firebase for authenticating users. That being said, though, we'll only do that a little bit later, because at the moment we have nothing on the front end that would allow users to enter their credentials, and that's therefore what we're going to get started with. We're going to come back to Firebase later and to sending requests to Firebase later. For now, we're going to focus on adding an authentication screen to this app here so that we can collect and send those user credentials.